It is not quite time for Deal or No Deal. We're going to talk about Manchester City against Wolves first because Phil Egan is here with us this morning. Phil, how are you?
How you doing? How are you getting on?
Man City good at football. Who knew?
Yeah, very similar to what we saw from them last season. Spells in the game where they just looked so superior to their opposition. But then in the second half, there was about a 20-minute spell where Wolves had them on the rack and had chances, didn't put them away. Eventually, Jimenez scores and sets up that grandstand finish. And you think back to last season, a lot of the goals Wolves scored in that double that they did over City came in the last 10 minutes, but they couldn't find the equaliser, and obviously Jesus wraps it up in injury time. But yeah, in terms of the team selection, Ake obviously got his debut. Him and Stones played centre half, and Mendy played left back. Mendy will give you something going forward, but I think we saw in the game last season that gave Liverpool the secure the title the night that City lost to Chelsea. Mendy, Guardiola just doesn't trust him in big games. Wouldn't be surprised later in the season if you see Ake playing as the left back, especially in those big games, maybe those big European games.
Is he good enough? Yeah.
Well, he's played there for the Dutch national team, and we've seen Guardiola do this before, where I think back to when they played Liverpool in the Champions League, he started Laporte at left back, and it's something that we know that Guardiola, for these big games, some people accuse him of overthinking things and maybe kind of going away from what they do so well. But Ake is definitely an option there. Well, Laporte comes back in. Is he going to play Ake and Laporte as his two centre halves? There's still talk of them trying to get another centre half in, whether it's Koulibaly, we don't know. But yeah, obviously, look, De Bruyne was brilliant again yesterday. He won the penalty. He pulled the strings. Phil Foden looked very good. Jesus, as good as he is, just isn't Sergio Aguero in terms of finishing. He is very much a different player, and Sterling was lively as well. And just, he played Fernandinho and Rodri as holding players. Now, I don't know if Gundogan would have started. Obviously, he tested positive for COVID-19, so that took him out of the selection. And yeah, like I said, they were very sharp in the first half. Wolves were poor in the first half. Obviously, he played Adama Traore in the Matt Doherty role in a 3-4-3, whereas when Doherty was in the team, obviously we know he's gone now, there's talk of Semedo coming in from Barcelona, which would be good signing for Wolves, and he'd obviously go into that role, and then that means you can play Traore further up the pitch, because Traore did the damage against City last season. Now, sometimes what they did was they would play a 3-5-2, and it was Traore with Jimenez, but Traore would just wander around the pitch, and basically Wolves sit in their defensive shape. As soon as they get the ball, they look for Traore, and when he gets on it, then obviously we know the damage he can do, but he just didn't get that opportunity to do it as much, especially in the first half. It was actually him that gave away the ball that led to the Phil Foden goal. So yeah, City are going to be brilliant at times, but definitely watching that game last night, if you were a Liverpool fan, you would have been thinking they still have those issues to sort out at the back, where if they're not holding onto the ball, they can be got at, and they just don't convince you at the back.
Is it a very similar fix to Liverpool? Because I think on the evidence of Sunday, if Joe Gomez or you don't want to ever hope this happens from a Liverpool perspective, but if Virgil van Dijk ever gets injured this season, then Fabinho is your backup there. It seems pretty clear from that he was so good on Sunday. Is Fernandinho at centre half a better option than John Stones, essentially, if Laporte's absence is prolonged?
Yeah, I think so. But the problem then, if you take Fernandinho out of midfield, then you lose something in midfield, and you lose that protective shield. And Rodri is an excellent player, but Fernandinho, even though he's 35, he knows how to play that role a lot better, and he's quite clever as well. Sometimes he can take that yellow card when a team is breaking, and actually sometimes he doesn't even get the yellow card. He could commit 2 or 3 fouls before he picks up the yellow card, and then obviously he's walking the line where he's one more foul away from getting sent off. So that's something we saw last season, where Fernandinho came in, played centre half, but you kind of lose something in midfield. But Guardiola often asked Fernandinho to drop in between the two centre halves as well to give them that protection. But it was interesting that he played 2 holding midfielders. I don't know what selection he would have gone with if Gundogan was available. Obviously, Gundogan played 49 games in all competition last season, so he's a player that Guardiola tends to pick. So does Fernandinho, Rodri both start if he has his full squad available? I'm not sure. But yeah, John Stones, it was interesting. There was a few times where he just lumped the ball down. He didn't take any chances, and maybe he's been told just to go back to basics and don't get caught in the ball. But it would appear that it's not... doesn't look like John Stones has a long-term future at Manchester City. We've obviously seen things can change quickly in football, but he's been given plenty of opportunities and he hasn't exactly excelled, has he?
No, not exactly. Can we get your take on Thiago from Sunday, Phil? Because obviously we had Kenny in with us yesterday.
Is he on? Did he say something about Thiago?
I still scratch my head a little bit at the signing. Their squad is strengthened by Thiago's arrival, but for me, they've spent 30 million on a third choice number 6. I think he's inferior to Fabinho and Jordan Henderson in that role. That's why I'm surprised they brought him in. Thiago's an experienced player, a good technician, and we saw a bit of that yesterday. But what we also saw were defensive deficiencies. We saw the number of missed tackles. We saw the penalty giveaway. He is weak defensively.
Yeah, it was 45 minutes of football, his first game.
He's not basing that on 45 minutes of football. Yeah. He says he's watched him at Barcelona and he's watched him at Bayern Munich, in fairness. So, like, he's not overreacting to the 45 minutes we did say.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But the thing about the role Thiago played when he came on and the role that he could play in the season is, you know, if he's playing that deep line midfield role, he's basically there as a creator. And he mightn't give you the same protection that Fabinho or Henderson do, but he gives you a different option. And he is brought in. One thing watching him the other day when he came on was, with so many of the Liverpool players, we know what they're about, we know how they play, whereas there's that bit of unpredictability with Thiago, where we know that Liverpool's most creative players are their fullbacks, who obviously essentially play as wing backs. So teams have copped onto this where they're trying to stop them. So Thiago now gives you a different option where opposition teams have to look at how can we stop him. He can play that ball in behind defence. He can split that, you know, low block. And yeah, maybe he's not as good in terms of his defensive abilities, but he's certainly better than Henderson and Fabinho in terms of the way he passes the ball about. So I don't know. I think you have to look at what he brings rather than what he doesn't bring. That's why Liverpool have signed him. And
sure, he's breaking records, Phil.
Yeah, I wouldn't really worry too much about that.
Was what Kenny said that controversial?
Well, I know Kenny obviously made comments last season about Fabinho and Jordan Henderson, and he feels Henderson is more dynamic in that role. And I mean, that pretty much worked out when Fabinho went out of the team. Henderson came in and played that 6 role, and he played it really well. So I don't think it's an issue that...
Why are the Liverpool fans losing it? That's what I'm asking you.
I think the fact is, you've brought this guy. If you watch the Champions League final, he was the best player on the pitch, and Liverpool have signed them for just over 20 million. And given the way the fixtures are going to come thick and fast, I think that the midfield is going to be the one area that feel Liverpool are going to change the most. So it's not about who's first choice, because he's going to change his midfield a lot this season, Jurgen Klopp. So Thiago...
Liverpool fans are being touchy, is what you're saying, Phil. That's what I'm getting off you there. It's like they're overreacting a little bit because Kenny's pointed something out that may or may not...
But I don't know, like, is the issue here not to do with, like, what Kenny said about him defensively? Is it not just being picked up on one little moment where he gave away a penalty?
No, he said it's based over years of watching him.
Yeah, but obviously the reason to be talking about the defensive frailty was as a result of giving away the penalty.
He literally said it 10 minutes before that in commentary, this guy's not a good tackler. And then 10 minutes later he gives away a penalty. He goes, look, I mean, you're going to have to get used to this.
Yeah, but Liverpool did not sign Thiago for tackling. They didn't sign him and go, he's going to be this combative midfielder. He is the conductor of the orchestra. So he's the guy that doesn't give the ball away. Liverpool, as good as they've been, their midfield, you know, the function is to get the ball back as quick as you can, get on the attack. Whereas now they have a guy that can control the tempo of a game. He can sit in front of the back four, demand the ball in tight spaces, bring other players into the game. And if he isn't as good at tackling as Henderson and Fabinho, I don't think Jurgen Klopp's going to lose any sleep or say, right, Thiago, you're going to have to stay back after training, we're going to learn how to tackle. He's perfectly capable of tackling, he likes to put the foot in, but he was not signed for being a defensive shield. He is signed to play in a deep line midfield role, to start attacks. People might point out that he doesn't have high numbers in terms of assists the way, say, somebody like Kevin De Bruyne does, but I don't really read too much into that, because if Thiago splits a defence for Trent Alexander-Arnold or Andy Robertson to put in the cross, Robertson or Alexander-Arnold get the assist in terms of the stats, but who put the killer ball in? It was Thiago. I think Liverpool have just signed this. A lot of Liverpool fans are just excited about the fact that they've signed a player that's the finished article, whereas under Klopp, what he has done is he has signed players with serious potential. Obviously, Klopp is such a good coach that he gets the best out of them, but here he has a player that's the finished article. You bring him into a league-winning team and you're trying to just sprinkle a little bit more magic dust on what is already a winning team that can now try and retain their Premier League title and try and win back their Champions League title as well.
Okay, time for deal or no deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training I was driving home, I was actually thinking, regretting it, what have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it? Liverpool and Real Madrid will both try to sign France striker Kylian Mbappe from Paris Saint-Germain next summer. Pretty fanciful and far off next summer, obviously. But is this where Liverpool are headed? Will they become a destination for the world's very best player?
No. I think he's going to end up at Real Madrid. He wants, like, he's always talked about Real Madrid as his dream move, and he's flirted with Liverpool and he said nice things about them, and he's been asked about Jurgen Klopp, and yeah, great manager, and he did an interview earlier in the year. At the time, Liverpool were unbeaten in the league, and he said they're so impressive, they're a machine, they just keep winning. Obviously, Mbappe has played against Liverpool as well. He's scored at Anfield. He's played at Anfield. He knows what it's all about. But in terms of the way you'd have to finance this deal, Liverpool missed out on Timo Werner because they couldn't match the finances of Chelsea in terms of how Chelsea had more cash up front. Liverpool are after signing a couple of players now where they give a little bit of money and obviously it's paid in instalments, which is usually the way transfers work. But obviously the more cash you can offer a club up front, that puts you in a stronger position. And I'd imagine if PSG are going to lose Kylian Mbappe, they would want as much cash up front. Now, next summer he's only going to have a year left in his contract. It doesn't look like he's going to sign the new deal with PSG.
No. Very interesting. You should be mortgaging the house to try and get Mbappe. Right, Crystal Palace have angrily denied making a £25 million offer for Liverpool and England under-21 striker Rhian Brewster, who's only 20. Why not Liverpool just loan him out?
Because if they sell him, they obviously get money. And if he's really good, there'll be a buyback clause. I would imagine they would put a buyback clause or first refusal in the contract. So if he is really all that, they'll get to see him in the Premier League and they'll say, right, you know what? He's proved us.
So they want the money and they also want the opportunity to buy him back.
Yeah.
As opposed to just loaning him out.
If they loan him out and he doesn't really work out, there's nobody coming in looking for him next summer, then they won't get cash for him. But this is a guy that hasn't played in the Premier League and they could be getting more than 20 million for him. And he needs to get out, I think. He needs to play first team football. He's 20. He's looking at his former teammates, the likes of Phil Foden and Jadon Sancho, who are on that under-17 World Cup winning team with England, who Jadon Sancho is a superstar now. Obviously, Phil Foden is now starting games for Manchester City. And Brewster was a star on that team. He won the Golden Boot in that tournament. He was meant to be the next big thing. He just has. How do you break into the front three of Liverpool? It's just so difficult. So if he was to go somewhere like Crystal Palace, I know Sheffield United have been mentioned, but they were more looking at a loan deal. Whereas if Palace, I know the chairman Steve Parish has said he kind of rubbished those reports that were on Sky yesterday. But if Palace are willing to pay money, then Liverpool are going to take it. OK, to Manchester United, there's a series of names here that they have been linked with, are close to, or inquired about. Porto left-back Alex Telles, hopeful of sealing a move to Manchester United, but the clubs have yet to agree a fee. There's also been a shift in United's intent
after the defeat to Crystal Palace, as in they realise that they really need him. Also interested in RB Leipzig and France defender Upamecano. We've heard this consistently. The money might be too much at the moment, but maybe it's time to panic. And also, apparently over the summer, they made an inquiry for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but they were put off by the 80 million valuation, which, you know, looks cheap after any man who can score a goal with his shoulder/back. I mean, how do you mark that? I don't know. Are Manchester United primed to do some panic buying? Any of these going to arrive, Phil?
I think Telles looks like it could get done. I've thought for a couple of seasons that United do need a left back, and a left back that can get up and down. That's what you need in the modern game. And they have obviously Wan-Bissaka on the other side of the pitch, who the strength of his game is defending. So, you know, you need at least one left back that's going to be able to get up and down and give you that outlet, because what we saw the other day against Crystal Palace again is a well-organised team that sits deep. United struggle to break them down. And this is what Bruno Fernandes was brought in for, but Palace were so well organised. We know Roy Hodgson drills his team in terms of the training and how they have to sit in. But Luke Shaw's injury record, he's just not going to get up and down that pitch the way you want. If you look at the best left backs in world football, I'm not saying Alex Telles is the best left back in world football, but he certainly would be an upgrade there, and a guy that has an eye for a goal. Does take penalties if Bruno's ever off the pitch, but he also sets up goals as well, and that's something Luke Shaw hasn't really got in his game. And as I said, with the injury record, the problem with United obviously is we've been talking about this all summer about getting deals done. They haven't done it, and they had an extra week. You would have thought that if they could hit the ground running and look fresh, but they looked anything but. And we know at United, just the size of the club, one bad result and things just change. Just everything becomes so negative. Saying that though, when you expect, I think back to the Burnley game last season when they lost at Old Trafford. They had just lost to Liverpool at Anfield. I don't think many people thought Solskjaer would see the season out.
No,
and then
they turned it around. They
went unbeaten. They finished third, and you think, right, he's done his bit. He's got you back into the Champions League now. You got to back him, and they haven't.
No, they haven't. Not properly. Let's talk a little bit about Wilfred Zahra, who this time 3 weeks ago, I suspect you would have been able to get at a bargain price, because people kind of thought his moment had come and gone, and then all of a sudden he burst into this season. And now Roy Hodgson is saying it will be hard for the club to keep him if a big money bid comes in. Wink, wink, nods. Come on, everybody, come on. How much money? Roll up, roll up. The Wilfred Zaha stakes are open. Should any Premier League club be taking a serious look at him now, and who?
I think a lot of clubs would love to have him, but I just think they're going to get priced out of it. Very similar to the way Jack Grealish was at Aston Villa, where I know he's since signed his new contract, but it was just going to be a lot of money for somebody to fork out. And Zaha started the season so well. Obviously he got the winner against Southampton, scored 2 goals against United. And you look at the signing of Eze, they got the young lad they got in from QPR, and you wondered, was this guy being brought in maybe you know, with a view to replacing Zaha? But if you actually have him in the same team as Zaha, do we start seeing the best of Zaha again? Because a lot of teams, when they play Palace, they just double up on Zaha. Whereas I feel if he goes to a bigger club and there's obviously better players around him, he'll get more space. So Arsenal was a club that he was always linked with, but now Arsenal look like they're actually pretty well set in attack. And we know that, well, we hear that they don't have money yet. They always seem to find money, but they do their deals in that way. I was speaking about earlier about instalments, that they don't necessarily have to front up the cash. But
back to United.
Well, I don't. I think United's priority. We talked about a left back there. United need a centre back, and they could certainly do with one more attacking player. But maybe Zaha doesn't want to go back to United.
Okay, so no deal for Zaha. He's going to be a Crystal Palace player at the end of the transfer window.
I think so. Yeah.
All right, that's your deal or no deal for today. Thanks, Phil.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it?